Hello and welcome to Writer Rant, author advice in 5 minutes or less because I've got to get back to writing and so do you. So you know when you're reading a book and you're thinking, oh man, this is really flowing really great, and all of a sudden you get to an exposition dump. You're like, ugh, I gotta read through all of this. Some people will put down a book. I usually suffer my way through it. And this is kind of the issue with too much information, right? So too much description sometimes it drags down the action, drags down the flow. So it's like, hey, that's great. I mean, let's do an example here. So hey, we got this fight sequence here, and then all of a sudden we're describing like the fist that's going to punch our villain in the face in like excruciating detail, like paragraphs of detail, and it's like, okay, well, can we get to that punch yet? Like, I know you've got to build up some anticipation, but honestly, how much information is too much information? And there is something to be said about using the right words. Obviously, you don't want to drown your readers in $50 words that they're going to have to look up in a dictionary. But sometimes, there's cases where like a single word kind of describes the entirety of an object or an action or something like that. In my first book, I've had people tell me it's like, I had to look up the word akimbo, but it was easier for me to say that a character stood there, like arms akimbo, instead of arms out, fists on hips, that kind of action. It's like there's a single word that just kind of described that, and that's great. But do I even need to put that in there? It's like, yeah, I mean, there's kind of a pose, there's kind of character building, kind of showing, hey, here's what this character's like, kind of sassy character. But yeah, I mean, when it comes down to it is, your description is great. It really kind of helps cement the reader in the world that you created, but too much of it can kind of, again, be too much of a good thing. And sometimes it's kind of dependent on genre. So for instance, if you have a book that's an adventure or whatever, and you start putting in too much gore or too much sex, it's, I mean, you can have genres like that. You can have, horror has obviously, instances where there's a lot of gore. Erotica has obviously got very descriptive sex scenes. But sometimes, maybe let your reader's imagination kind of fill in the gaps. Kind of give them the structure, and if there's something that's kind of plot specific, call that out. But yeah, just driving that down to like extreme detail, it's like, okay, I mean, you're kind of losing me here. Can we get to something that's interesting? I don't know how many readers out there have as small of attention spans as I do, but sometimes I'm like, I just start scanning at that point. I'm like, okay, hey, can we get to something good? And again, sometimes the best details that you have in a story are the ones that are kind of left unsaid, that are hidden between the lines of text, that are kind of touched on, but don't really come into play yet. So, I mean, a lot of that comes down to foreshadowing, right? It's like, hey, here's this coffee cup on this table over here, and, you just briefly mention it, offhand, and later it turns out, oh, well, the person woke up from a nap on the couch and knocked it over and spilled coffee all over a laptop or something like that. It's like, hey, that's great. You described, you had the information of there was a coffee cup, and, it didn't say whether it had coffee in it or not. We can assume either it's empty or it's full, but, it comes into play later. Whereas, yeah, I mean, maybe you describe it as being a full cup of coffee, steaming to the brim, and just, you're diving so deep into it that suddenly, like, all of your readers are just like, wow, something's obviously going to happen with that coffee cup because you've spent so much time describing it. Anyways, I don't want to spend too much time on the fact of too much information here, so just suffice it to say, if there's anything about too much information in books that you read, what do you think about this? Let's discuss it in the comments below. Is too much information a good thing, a bad thing? Let's talk about it. And if there's anything else in reading or writing or reviewing that you really don't like, kind of frustrates you, drop a comment below, and maybe I'll feature it in a future episode of Writer Rant. So thanks for watching this episode of Writer Rant. I'm Benjamin M. Weilert.